Hello everyone, welcome back to the Athlete Branding Podcast, episode 3. It's been a little while since I was last here on YouTube with some more content for athletes. Today I'm joined by James, who is the Chief Operating Officer at UCFB, my former university, as I've mentioned previously. James, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, pleasure to be here, George.
So we've got a little bit I've got quite a few topics to touch on today. Obviously, we're going to give lots of advice to athletes who are going to want to monetize their image better and build an audience and work with brands, particularly MMA athletes, because that's one of the sports that I've followed for a number of years now. Got a little network in. So I remember when I was in one of your guest lectures at UCFB in my first year, and when you were working for a marketing agency, you mentioned that you worked with the UFC to help them market Bisping versus Silva, who are two fighters who are very close relationships with my coach, ironically, which is pretty cool. So could you tell us a little bit about what that was like and what the strategy was and what your goals were?
Yeah, for sure. I've been in sports marketing my whole career since I left university about 15 years ago now, or just under, and that's one of the pinnacles of my career, just marketing a couple of superstars in an absolutely epic event. And by that time, the UFC was a huge global brand, and domestically as well. It's just gone from strength to strength, hasn't it? So it's those moments in your career as a marketer, or a sports marketer more specifically, that you live for. That's where the adrenaline is running when you think about that event that I'm promoting and getting to meet or work with those kind of superstar athletes at the top of their game, who you idolize as individuals and sports people. It's one of those moments in my career I'll always be look back so fondly on, and know that it's all worth it. The slog of building your career and the slog of working long hours and working on unglamorous events and doing unglamorous chores. When you got those special small moments, it's all worthwhile. And those guys were fantastic to work around, and the event was so special.
Yeah, I think UFC is a really interesting one, and not just UFC but MMA overall, because I think obviously with all sports, what you're really selling is an experience and a memory. And I think because UFC or MMA fighters only, they fight maybe 30, 40 times in a career, and football teams will play that many games in a season. So each fight is kind of bigger, and it's more, I feel like with a lot of fights, as a fan, I feel like I'm witnessing a piece of history. I remember when Holly Holm knocked out Ronda Rousey in Melbourne. I think it was Melbourne. And it's just like, it just felt like such a historic moment. And even though I wasn't there physically, it was kind of like, I remember watching this, and I remember watching me at home and enjoying the experience. And I guess now it's sort of augmented with, you can go on your phone straight away and see what the conversations are around that moment. I guess something that you've not really had traditionally with sports. So I think MMA is obviously an incredibly interesting one for yourself if you're working on lots of different projects and different sports, to really kind of build this up as a memory for fans. And I think obviously it being in London, and that was Bisping's home country, arguably having the biggest fight of his career, which it was such an amazing fight. And I think even now the legacy of that fight is probably bigger, because he then went on to win the title on 2 weeks' notice. I think that's obviously a really interesting one for a sports marketer. So,
and isn't it interesting that sport has that power to create moments, unlike much else in the world? You hit the nail on the head there. You remember where you were at certain historic sports moments, and a sports moment, when you look back on the year just gone, it's big sports moments that any fan is going to remember. It's up there with like the birth of your first child or your wedding. People look back on their life and they think, where was I when that that event happened, or that MMA fight happened in London at the O2 and I was in the 5th row, or something like that. Sport, and that's the incredible cultural power of sport, to bring a nation together and to get hundreds of millions of eyeballs on this one event. It's so special, just observing sport from afar, really.
Yeah, I agree. So when you were obviously working for a marketing agency at that point, doing lots of different projects, when you then had to work with the UFC for that event, what was the kind of strategy? What when the UFC brought you guys in to help them market the event, what was your role within it? What were you doing?
So like everything in life, there's a reason, there's an objective, there's a strategy behind the UFC hiring a sports marketing agency. Just like an athlete should have a reason, a strategy, a goal for hiring a sports marketing agency or an agent or a consultant. What do you want to get out of this? And the UFC, their main objective was to increase the awareness of the fight in the national media and international media, get more people paying for the pay-per-view, and at the end of the day, make more money. It's a money-driven sport, and that's what they hired us for, is to get more eyeballs on the event, get more awareness of the event, hype these superstars, and get people to buy the pay-per-view. So our role was really just to as an agency, we didn't have incredible non-stop 24 hours a day access to the athletes at all. We had access to content, we had access to past footage, we had access to imagery of the athletes, and then we had very, very small windows where we actually got to use them and push them through media interviews, make sure their press conference was as packed as possible, and make sure that they were in as many newspapers, websites, social media accounts as possible. So it was not like we were side by side with the athlete. It was really using anything we could get hold of to big them up. And the objective was met in the end. It was, probably the biggest fight on British soil ever. It was huge numbers that it did. The ticket sales revenue was the biggest ever for a UK event. And global viewership was incredible. So the UFC hired our agency for a purpose. We achieved the purpose. Everyone was happy. End of the day, and that's how a client usually approaches any given brief. It's, this is your target, or these are your targets. We've seen your past evidence that you can do this. Show us that you can do it again. Here's the fee. We'll all be happy. And then if they're satisfied with the job we do, they'll rehire us, and then they'll rehire us, and then they'll rehire us. And it's great. It's just great to be part of events like that, and satisfy the client's needs and get the business again, do more fights, and everyone has a happy life.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that one of the key things that you had to do was actually build a relationship between the fans and the actual fighters who were competing, because obviously each UFC card is different, and they're not always going to have the same fighters on every single card. So I think that really shows the kind of importance of storytelling, and it's something that the UFC have tried to do more in the last few years. I think the difficulty for the UFC is that I don't think they distribute it particularly well. A lot of their content, where they're storytelling the lives of fighters and about their careers, is on UFC Fight Pass, which is a paid app. So if you actually want to build awareness and build relationships between UFC fans and their fighters, but you then expect them to pay something like £6-7 a month, you're going to have a difficulty doing that, and especially attracting new fans. I'm a UFC fan. I watch pretty much all the cards when I can, but even I don't pay for it, because for me, there's just not enough real sort of value in it for me to subscribe month on month on month. So I actually think it would be a better idea for the UFC just to make that app free, and then just put loads and loads of content on there about every single fighter, and make it easy for fans to search, whether it's by fighter, by event, by nationality of the fighter, or whoever, or even the type of content, whether it's a fight archive or an Ultimate Fighter series, or whether it's just a vlog about the fighter, or whatever. And I actually think that way you'd give new fans a way to actually understand the brand and understand the sport and the history of it, and get them invested in that way. And obviously, I don't know all the sort of financial implications behind doing that, but the UFC were actually making fighters get Fight Pass subscriptions if they want to watch old fights of their opponents. So where the UFC used to just give fighters tape of their all the fights for free, they now expect fighters to pay for Fight Pass because it was struggling that much. And this is in a time where pay-per-view numbers are constantly dropping. The anomaly really is Conor McGregor, but he fights maybe once a year of that. So the UFC is struggling. I'm not going to talk about the pay-per-view model because that's not really what this podcast is about, although I could go on for ages about that. But for me, I think if the UFC made that switch, they would have so many more people invested in the sport, and I think the sport would grow so much quicker. And I think it's only really done that in the last few years, just because of Conor McGregor, that just earned the brand so much media because of what he said in press conferences or in the media or on his social media, and people just shared it, and it was just earned, and it just got shared and shared and shared. The media picks up on it, and then that's how the brand was being put in faces of people who weren't fans of the sport, really. So for me, that's what the UFC should do, is actually give more value for free to fans and engage them more in that way. And I think that's not only going to help the UFC, but it's going to help fighters, because as I was saying to you before we started recording, is that the problem for athletes is some of them are struggling to get people invested in them as an athlete. And I don't know how follow you closely MMA, but Demetrius Johnson was probably one of the biggest question marks in the history of the sport, in that he's arguably the greatest fighter of all time, but had the worst pay-per-view numbers of any champion in the sport. So people were saying, well, the UFC needs to market him better. But what can they actually do? Well, a lot of the behind-the-scenes content they were filming with Demetrius Johnson ahead of his fight was, again, behind a paywall. A little bit's on YouTube, but that's not a lot, in my opinion. It's all behind a paywall. So how are you going to get people invested in these fighters if you're putting it behind paid content? That should be a bonus. But for me, all that storytelling, you should be giving that value to fans in the first place. And that's how I think the sport will grow in the future, if the UFC do that. And if they don't, then they're incredibly complacent, and I actually think they're really going to give an advantage to other organisations who pick up on that. Because I think for sure in the last few years, the gap has closed between the UFC and between Bellator.
Agree. It's an eyeballs game at the end of the day, isn't it? You're fighting for eyeballs, viewership. And if no one's exposed to UFC fighters, it's not put in front of them, then they don't know about them and they can't become their fans. And the fighters then can't make money if they can't get sponsors, because there's no one watching their events or no one knows about them. Totally agree. It's a tough balancing act that the UFC has between making as much money on pay-per-view through pay-per-view as possible, but getting as many fans that actually want to pay for those pay-per-views in the first place. How did you, as a fan, first get into MMA or first become a fan of the sport?
So I was just about to tell the story. So it's really interesting that when EA first got the rights to make the UFC game, they made their first installment of the UFC game series. I was watching someone play it on YouTube, and it was in that I was like, this game looks fun. So I then bought the game, and then from there I actually got interested in the sport. And it was just at that time where the UFC started showing all of their events on BT Sport, and I already had a BT Sport subscription to watch football. So I was like, okay, I've already started to get into MMA, so I'll kind of go from there. First event was actually Conor McGregor fighting Diego Brandao in Dublin. So before he was even particularly big, I wouldn't have known that he was ever going to get as big as he is now. And again, that was an event where he built an experience because he had this cult following of Irish fans behind him, and it created that experience and those memories that people hold on to, because the referee for that fight was Leon Roberts, who coaches where I train. So I've spoken to him about this on many occasions, and he said he's never felt anything like it in his life. He actually, as Conor McGregor was walking out to the cage, he had to hold on to the cage because the mat was shaking, and he thought he would come across as nervous on camera if people saw him shaking, so he had to hold on to the cage to stand still. So it was, again, Conor McGregor created that experience, and it was a huge part of it was me going, this is entertaining, watching this Irish guy wind up this Brazilian guy. That was part of the fun. That was part of the product. And again, if the UFC aren't showing enough of that on their social media and it's all going behind a paywall, how are you going to get people involved? Because ultimately it was free content, which wasn't even made by the UFC. It's made by a YouTuber playing the game, which got me invested into the sport. And then it didn't actually, okay, I was paying for BT Sport, but it didn't cost me anything extra because I was already paying it. So that's how I got into the sport, and people aren't going to pay for something they don't know what it is. You actually have to show the brand and show the sport and get people to understand it in the first place. And yeah, I really don't think in that sense the UFC helps its athletes to actually market themselves. For me, they should be marketing all of their top athletes all year round, not just ahead of a fight. It should be ramped up before a fight, but it should be all year round. All these athletes now have to be their own media company, as every company has to be its own media company. Even if you're selling trainers, you have to be your own media company, because social media's changed the game, and you have to just, that's where the attention is. You have to entertain people on social media. You can't just ask them to buy your product. It doesn't work like that anymore. So every athlete has to make their own content and show who they are inside of the sport and outside of it, and then get people invested in them that way. And then from when they get people invested in them, start engaging. Social media is perfect for that.
That's right. Such an interesting example, because I'm 100% sure 10 times as many people have seen some Conor McGregor content on social media than have actually watched a fight of his.
Right.
They know who he is because they see short clips of him acting a fool at a press conference, or posting through his Instagram account about his luxury life. And they know who he is as an individual, as a personality, much more than they know if he's a good MMA fighter or not. It's incredible how restricted access to fights and access to that sport content is in some sports. And I totally agree. Get your sport in front of the maximum amount of people. That's the beauty of something like free-to-air TV, or posting streams live for free on YouTube or Facebook, or because you need that mass audience to know who your sport is, and some sports do that really well. There's the NBA made a conscious decision. It's in the last 5 years or so, I think, to make all of their content rights free, distributable by anyone. If you post NBA highlights on Instagram, they won't stop you or shut you down. They encourage it. They want as many people to take their content and share it for free as possible, so everyone sees LeBron James doing a crazy posterization dunk on someone. And that was their plan. They realized we're in the social media age. Spread our content as much as you want for free, and eventually we'll build fans, and they'll pay for a Sky Sports subscription, or they'll pay for an NBA League Pass, because they've seen us in their feed so much and they love us that they're now a fan.
And the UFC does the exact opposite. If you post anything on social media that's UFC related that you don't own, they get rid of. Because if it's out on social media for free, why would you pay for Fight Pass? That's their thinking. But it doesn't work, because people don't want to buy Fight Pass because you don't have their attention in the first place. So yeah, I mean, how good would it be if, I don't know, maybe 20-30% of people I know are MMA fans in some capacity. So if I can actually share UFC content to my entire audience on social media, then there's a chance of that other 70% or so might then see it and be like, oh, okay, this is actually quite entertaining, watching this guy get kneed in the face or something like, you know what I mean? So you're actually stopping the sport from being put in front of other people. And not only that, you're actually stopping the brand from being put in front of other people. Because if then Bellator or One Championship or Cage Warriors over here start getting content out there, people then might start to be introduced to the sport and not see UFC as the face of the sport, which is what they want. They want the UFC to be known as, we are the promotion, we have the best MMA, we have the best talent. But if you don't put that brand in front of people who aren't aware of the sport, they're going to actually get another idea that Bellator are the promotion, or Cage Warriors are the promotion to watch. And it's not only that. There's actually levels to it, in my opinion. In that there's someone who does breakdowns called Robin Black, and he takes a minute clip of a fight or so, and he'll break it down. Really, really good technical detail. But he can't do it with the UFC because they'll copyright strike him. So he's doing it with Bellator. He's doing it with every other brand. He's doing it with boxing matches, and it gives fans a real insight into the actual level that these athletes are. And that, I think, is the next level. Once you have someone's attention, get them to really understand the sport, and then get them really invested. Because I know when I could tell the difference between the strategy behind what fighters are doing, rather than this is just two guys throwing hands at each other, it then takes me to a new level of being interested in the sport because I actually understand what I'm watching. So I think the UFC are really, really missing the trick there. I really think they are. So occasionally they'll put like an old fight on YouTube. If say, I don't know, say McGregor's fighting in a couple of months, they'll put one of his old fights where he wins decisively to kind of build him up. But after he then fights in a couple of months, I'll take that video off YouTube, and then if you want to watch it again, you've got to pay for a Fight Pass subscription, and it just doesn't engage people. And this is what I don't know if the UFC will ever change strategy on that, but in doing that, they don't get people invested in their athletes, and they're lucky that really McGregor was good at doing it by himself, because McGregor knew who he was. He could be funny at press conferences. He could be authentic. He could be entertaining. And that content was good enough to be spread to the masses, and that got people invested. But not every fighter is Conor McGregor. He's an outlier in all of this. And that's fine. Not every fighter will be as entertaining as McGregor. That's fine. But you have to find your niche. You have to know who you are, what you want to talk about, what kind of brand you want to build, and then communicate it so that it still makes for good content that people want to share. And that's obviously, as we were saying, that word of mouth is just so important to getting the content out to new eyeballs. So yeah, in that sense, athletes have to become a media company of their own. They have to have their own content to show who they are, show what value they can give to fans, show why they're different. Because if you're new to the sport of MMA or even football, you're just going to see a whole load of guys with mostly English sounding names, and they're all going to look not particularly different unless they've got some like crazy hairstyle or something. But you know, that obviously helps you stand out. But if you don't differentiate yourself in that way, then you never have a chance of that. And it's actually what I studied for my dissertation, is how can MMA fighters build a brand and stand out. And I basically categorized it into three different categories. So firstly, you have your in-sport attributes. So that's something that I can't help with, really. That's how good you are at the sport, what your style is, how sportsmanship you are, basically. And then you have for everything out of the cage. So it could be how you conduct yourself out of the cage. What's your life story? What's your image look like? How much do you engage with your fans? That I found was the most important one. So that's what athletes need to do, is actually have their own content. And the issue athletes will then have when they want to do that is, I don't have the time, or I don't know how to do it. So that's where, obviously, that's the problem I'm looking to solve, where I can help them actually build that brand themselves. So yeah,
athletes. I mean, having worked with athletes in a bunch of sports, from guys and girls who are the best in the world to people who are, you know, on a kind of national level and barely making ends meet financially. The one thing I'd tell them is, you've got to focus on your shit as an athlete. You got to focus on your sport. You can't be distracted by creating content or building your brand. Leave it to the professionals. Because it's I mean, as an elite athlete, they know this. It's the 1% differences that make you a world champion, or a nobody who doesn't have a contract. And if you're spending 5% of your time worrying about editing content for your social channels, or I haven't got a story out today, I need to keep it up. That's 5% of the time that you're not focusing on being the best in the world. And if you drop 1% in performance, you're nobody. Leave it to the professionals to work out a strategy with you. What do I want to do? What brand do I want to build? What's my personality? How are we going to show that as well as possible? And then let the professional do it. And while you focus on your sport and your craft and getting to the best possible place you can be, they'll make sure that brand is amplified as much as possible, and you're commercially attractive to brands to align with and sign deals with. Because as soon as you are not good at your sport anymore, don't believe that brands are still gonna align with you. It's over. You got to be the top percentage in your craft for brands to want to be with you. So let a professional help you with that while you get to be in the top % of your sport.
I agree, and that's something that athletes need to negotiate in themselves. Is how much time they want to invest. And obviously, the more you invest in building yourself commercially, the more you will get out of it. But I want to build what I would call an athlete first agency or a sport first agency, is that I know as someone who was considering going professional in the sport, and I've been surrounded by professionals, that ultimately first they have to actually be good at their sport, as good as they can be. And that's something that I'll always appreciate with athletes is, obviously I want them to be invested in their brand, but they need to obviously put in the hours and training as well. So whilst obviously if they want to create content around themselves, it will take some time. I don't think they should be there editing it or themselves, but taking time to reply to comments, just 20-30 minutes a day or something like that, will make a huge difference. Obviously if they want to do a vlog, then they need a camera crew around them, or they need to vlog that themselves. But that doesn't really take a huge degree of time, I don't think, because all they're really doing is just documenting their process of what they do. They just basically go through what they do in a day, except they're filming themselves saying, hey everyone, this is me before training, this is me interacting with my teammates or whatever. So that's what athletes need to do. And on your second point, obviously they need to be good at their sport for as long as possible. But it's not just about building a brand, it's about building a brand that has longevity. So after they retire, will brands still want to align with them? Or is there any brand who you partner with and then eventually you don't take a flat fee, you take equity in the company? Or you set up your own company doing something similar? Or if you're a jiu-jitsu expert as well as an MMA fighter, maybe you make your own jiu-jitsu tutorial series on YouTube, or you make it on a DVD and distribute it for a paid fee. And that's why you show yourself with free content, so that when you do want to sell something, maybe it's just t-shirts, for example, you can then ask for the sale because you have an invested audience in your brand. So one of the best at this, who I always talk about, I think I mentioned him on the first few podcasts I've done, is TJ Dillashaw. He's my favorite MMA fighter by a mile. Even though he's been suspended for the last 2 years with a drug suspension, I'm still so invested in him that it doesn't actually bother me that much. Because what he does, he puts out so much good free content that what he now does is he has what he calls his Fit to Fight series, which costs about $300, I think, where he'll take you through 100 different tutorials of MMA drills, MMA techniques. He has videos about nutrition. He does a free blog where you can go on his blog, and what he does, he actually bakes in adverts to his paid products. So he also has like a seasoning that's organic that he sells. It doesn't have any salt, because MMA fighters don't want salt in their seasoning because it stops them from cutting weight. So he can bake in those ads into those blogs. So he's giving me value, and then he can ask for sales because I'm getting invested in him, because he's giving me free information or free entertainment in some capacity. And that is really all it is. Athletes just need to find out who they are, what brand they want to build, and how they do that. And that kind of takes us on nicely to the second point that I wanted to touch upon, is when you know what content you want to create and who you are and what brand you want to build and who you're targeting, is what platforms do you use? Because again, this is something that athletes aren't marketers, they don't know. Instagram is probably the biggest platform right now where they should be on. The organic reach with Instagram isn't huge anymore, but I still think you kind of have a ready-made audience when you go and fight or when you go and play football. So people are always going to follow you on Instagram anyway, so that's the best place to be engaging. And I also think TikTok is the second one, because the organic reach there is the best place to reach new faces who already aren't watching the sport. And it's so easy to create content for TikTok, because if you say have that long form content like a podcast or a YouTube vlog, you can then just strip a little clip that's entertaining, that shows who you are in a nutshell, and just stick it on TikTok. And if it's good enough content, people will start sharing it, start liking it, and it just shows it to more people. And there's such an interesting opportunity with TikTok, because the audience is so primarily female. If you're an MMA fighter, you could make free MMA technique tutorials, but just rebrand it as self-defense for women, because it's going to get shared more, because they're not going to scroll past the MMA. They're going to have self-defense techniques. This is interesting. So every time my girlfriend comes across a self-defense tutorial on TikTok, she goes, "George, does this actually work?" She asked me about it, and she likes it. So there's definitely opportunities there. And obviously, if you start building a community around that, you can then sell a tutorial DVD or digital kind of series around that. and then that's how you monetize your image. This is what athletes need to be doing more and more of.
Yeah, I mean, TikTok, such an untapped market, isn't it? And if there's big opportunity, big opportunity. Hilarious how social media platforms just grow and then die off within 5 years, isn't it? But you've got to be on the ball. If you're not, you're missing out on the commercialization opportunities there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of athletes and even just businesses aren't really sold on TikTok because firstly, they think that you have to do just silly dances to music, which is obviously there's way more to it than that. But secondly, they just see it as being for young females. But if you get on TikTok and get familiar with it and find out what works and what doesn't, it's better to be on there because even if it doesn't take off, I mean, it has took off, but the audience will diversify. Instagram was initially just for, like kind of photography experts, so to speak, or I think Facebook was initially just for kind of like young college students, and now it's just that's the best place to reach an older demographic. The audience will diversify, and there will be a market there eventually for you. So it's best to be on there anyway already, just to kind of figure it out. And the second one that's untapped, in my opinion, is Spotify. I think it's such a sneaky competitor in the social media game, and it's such a simple way for athletes to engage with fans. So I mentioned Todd Cantwell before we started recording. He's someone who, when I look at his Instagram content or his Instagram stories, and even his TikToks, which he doesn't post anywhere near enough of, I can tell what kind of music he likes. So why can't he just set up a Spotify playlist, say Todd Cantwell match day playlist or whatever, or training playlist or gym playlist, and fill it up with music, and then he can engage with his audience in his Instagram stories and say, what should I add to the playlist? Or what do you like? What don't you like? Or what other playlist should I make? Should I make a gym playlist? Should I make a match day playlist? Should I make a drive-in playlist? And he can just build a community around his music. Or his music taste, and it just then gives that little bit of value and shows who he is to get people again invested in him. I can't say that enough. It will just get people invested in him, and it gives him more opportunities to keep engaging. And again, for MMA fighters, Instagram, what should I walk out to this week or for this fight, and add that to the playlist. Here's my top 5 gym songs this week. What's yours? And just engage with people in the comments of the Instagram post. It can be as simple as that. Not every piece of content has to be some like slick professional YouTube blog or whatever, or YouTube documentary about yourself. It can just be as simple as saying to your audience, what music are you listening to in the gym this week? And building a little community. Because then if that's something you build around, then you might partner with a headphone manufacturer, or you might partner with Spotify. They might say, hey, do you want to do a podcast on Spotify as well? And we'll give you some money for the exclusive rights to it. There's so many ways to actually build your brand and monetize yourself, as well as just doing a boot deal with Nike. Because that's kind of the traditional way of sports marketing. I think too many agents who don't understand marketing, who just understand the sport, don't realize that. They don't realize that how diverse the opportunities can be, because ultimately every athlete is different to one another. So it's just about communicating who you are and showing that you're a unique individual, and the opportunities for a brand partnership are literally endless.
Just listen to what you've been, the knowledge you've been spitting for the last few minutes about opportunities for athletes on social media. Not even traditional, just have an Instagram account, but all the new platforms that are available, and the cheeky little ways you can create content and build a following on your TikToks and Spotify's, as well as your traditional. Well, it's funny to call Instagram traditional, but it is now.
Yeah.
And point I'm making is, you're a professional at this. You've studied it for years at university. You've now been living it, building brands yourself as a sports marketer. And a regular athlete won't have anywhere near this knowledge. So just get a professional on board to help you with this. Don't try and mess your way around producing amateurish posts and things without any guidance or advice from someone who studied it for years. There's so much value in actually using experts and professionals at what they're good at to help you build your image as an athlete. Because it does take years of learning and observing and improving at social media and personal marketing and branding.
Yeah, and what athletes will notice, and something that I'll talk to them a lot about, if should they ever want to work with me, is you have to talk about more than just your sport. Otherwise, you don't really show how you're different. And the example I'd use for this is Virgil van Dijk and Gini Wijnaldum. That Gini Wijnaldum actually uses Spotify and he uses TikTok, but his Instagram and Twitter is still quite basic. And obviously, I'm a Liverpool fan, so I love both of these players. They're great players, and there's obviously no shade to either of them. But their social media on Twitter and Instagram isn't that good, in my opinion, because all they really do is just post a picture of them in training or post a picture of them playing a match, saying, hey, that was a good 3 points, or hey, we're ready for this weekend. And every footballer does that. And it's just not engaging. I just don't really care, because it's just a generic picture from the game that I've just watched. Show me something that is unique and that's different and shows me more about who you are. Get me to feel like I know you. Make me feel like you're my friend and that I know everything about you. Those are the athletes who are most successful, and those are the ones who will then start to get an audience who isn't just wise, but is also more engaged. Because if you're a partner brand, like let's just say a Nike, you want to work with athletes who actually have influence over the people who follow them. If you have 1 million followers who don't really care, you're then not going to have any leverage with your audience to sell them like products to them. But if they're invested and they love what you do and they love everything you say and they eat everything up, then they're going to buy whatever, or they're more likely to buy whatever you're endorsing. And then that means you create more leverage with brands who want to work with you. And you are then in a position to go up to brands and say, hey, I should work with you. You should pay me to endorse your product because X, Y, Z. So that's what athletes need to do, is actually in differentiating themselves.
You can tell when an athlete has their accounts run by someone who doesn't know their voice, who doesn't have a strategy. They're just churning out generic statements and generic-ish photos, and it looks like every other footballer or every other athlete's account, and it doesn't have any personal flavor behind it. It's so easy to tell, and you can just stand out so well by creating a personal strategy with your advisor or your consultant or your sports marketing agency. They have to know you. They have to agree with you. What's your voice? What are you going to focus on in your lifestyle or your sport that you want to tell the world? And I totally agree. Those who differentiate and those who correctly find the right voice with their agency or their agent or consultant stand out and become attractive to fans and sponsors.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, before I actually had this idea for a business, I didn't follow many players on social media because it was just the same thing. I thought there's no point. Ultimately, there was no value in it for me. And value could mean something different to every athlete, but it would usually be either something that's informational and educational or something entertaining. Now, you can fragment those two a little bit more, but generally, all successful social media content is either entertaining or useful. That's what social media is. So you can't just put out the same generic content and the same things and not comment reply to comments in your Instagram posts, because it doesn't engage people. And this is the second thing that football players need to do more of, because I never ever see this. Players who obviously want to engage with fans of the team that they play for, go and comment on their posts. That your target market is in the comment section of those posts. If you're Virgil van Dijk, your target market are the people commenting on a Liverpool FC post. So go and comment on it, and then reply to people who are commenting back to you. Or just jump in and find someone who's commented saying, hey, I can't wait for Virgil van Dijk to come back, and just say, thanks. Because they're going to screenshot that, they're going to put it on their Instagram story, they're going to send it to all their friends, and everyone's going to see that Virgil van Dijk cares about his audience and that he's genuine and authentic. And that's the way to win. That's the way to win in social media, is to be social. That I can't stress that enough. It seems so simple, but it is really. But athletes and agents don't actually understand this, and like I say, they just have so much wasted potential, and that's a problem that I'm looking to solve.
And every action you do is
Go ahead.
your brand. Every action you do online is your brand. So as the example you just used of Virgil van Dijk posting a picture and then people are giving tons and tons of comments, him replying to one or two or all of them is his brand. It shows a humanity about him, and as you just explained, it gets engagement from the fan base and the audience. And you just got to be aware everything you post is representing you. And if you post something and never reply, or if you never post, that's an action. That's a personal branding part of you.
Instagram Live is another perfect place to do that. Just quickly, just film yourself, answer some questions, and say, "Hey, everyone, comment," or something that over lockdown that Todd Cantwell, him as another example that he did, is he basically said that everyone's kind of lonely in lockdown, so I'll do an Instagram Live, and he'd say, right, everyone comment the surf emoji, because that's his like thing. He does like his goal celebration, like does a surf celebration. So he said, comment the surf emoji. Whoever's first can join me and talk to me. And I'll talk to like 4 or 5 people in the live stream. And it's gutting for me that he stopped, because it was such a good branding tool. It was just engaging with his audience. It doesn't take time or effort to make that content. It's literally sitting down for 20 minutes and say, I'm just going to talk to some fans. And that's literally all it can take. And again, if he wants to save what he does in that live stream, he can then just clip up little moments from it and put it on Instagram. Say, this is a conversation I had with a fan. What do you think? And create conversations in the comments. You go and comment back to people, and then you just engage. And what that does is that builds the metrics, it builds the engagement, it builds the following that's going to be appealing to brands. And this is where athletes need to go on LinkedIn and say, not post the same kind of content. It has to be contextual to LinkedIn, because obviously it's a professional platform, and say, this is my social media for this week. This is what I did with this brand. This is why it was successful. Because then there's going to be other people who are potentially going to look to work with athletes who are going to come across you, literally selling yourself to them with organic reach on that platform as well. So that's the other untapped platform that athletes actually need to use to kind of close the deal, so to speak, with partner brands. Is to go and do that, because that's where again more people who you want to be engaging with are.
And LinkedIn is where the decision makers are. That's where the people with the money are. That's where the chief commercial people or the sports marketing agency people are hanging around. They're looking around their professional network on LinkedIn. And if the people with the money like you, then they're very, 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 very much more likely to sign you or to work with you than if a 16-year-old likes you who has no influence in any commercial business.
Correct. But obviously, if you build leverage with your consumers and they will engage with everything you post and like everything you post and share everything you post, you then build leverage with those brands you want to work with, and you then become more commercially attractive to them, to a wider range of brands who want to work with you. And again, you can then build for the long term, and it might just be not just a sponsorship deal, but you could get equity in the company, and then that sets you up for after you retire. And not only that, but a lot of endorsement deals are performance based. So obviously a player might get 100 grand to promote some boots, but if they sell X amount, or the Instagram post get X amount of impressions or X amount of engagement, you then get a bonus. So if you can actually start building that engagement already with your fans, you're more likely to not only meet those bonuses, but they might just flat out say, look, we're going to give you more up front, because you're obviously more commercially viable, because you've built a deeper engagement with your audience, and that's really the name of the game. And like I say, it can be as simple as just doing it Instagram Live, or because that, for me, that creates brand experiences. Like we said at the start, sport is about selling an experience. So if you go on Instagram Live and talk to a fan, they're never going to forget that. If you go on Twitch and play a game of FIFA against the fan, they're never going to forget that. they're going to watch that back every single day for the next week. I just played FIFA against Virgil van Dijk, for example. And again, people share it around, and there could be funny moments within it that might become a wider part of your brand. Like you might say something really funny just off the cuff, and then you kind of hashtag that on every single post, for example. And then maybe a brand might want to have you say that in their ad or something like that, and it reinforces the brand even stronger. It just builds organically and authentically, which is obviously when you can market it authentically and organically as possible. That's what you want to do, because that sells more. And point number 4, which we're going to talk about, I think that's what Robertson and Alexander-Arnold do really, really well together. And that's what led to them getting their little series together, which they've done the last week, because they were tweeting each other with little banter on Twitter and Instagram. And then it leads to this whole other series that comes out of it, who again, they just show who they are, and everyone loves it. And even people who aren't on social media make social media accounts just to watch it exclusively on Instagram. So so they build this whole audience around it. So what are your thoughts as a marketer on content like that with those kind of athletes?
The wingman, that's what it's, isn't it?
Yeah.
By the way, too many Liverpool players we're talking about. It's starting to depress me how successful they are.
It's just an easy example for me, because obviously I'm following everything they do, so it's an easy example for me to bring in.
No, of course they've shown their personality so well. You just feel happy like watching and listening to them, and if they can give you those kind of emotions, then you're going to come back for more. If players make you feel special or happy or positive about the world, or excited or emotional about a big win or a goal you scored or a podcast you just put out, then it sends off the endorphins in your head, doesn't it? And it's addictive. You come back for more, and you want that feeling again. You want to be around those people. It's what the best personalities have, is they suck people in. You want to be around them because they give off such good energy and make you feel better about life and make you feel positive or excited about tomorrow or today or the football match or jumping on socials to view more of their content. And clearly that's their natural personality. They naturally are just those interesting people. And the fact that they've identified that they can get their personality out via this social media platform is really smart and good for them. And it'll only make them more popular and bring them more success and probably more commercial interest as well as a result of it.
Yeah,
getting their personality out there.
Yeah, it's one of the, I mean, like I said earlier, it's about making your audience feel like they know you. I think every fan watches it kind of envisaging themselves in the back, because you're having banter along with them, because you're just watching the whole thing without even realizing, just smiling along, laughing along, because it's been such a common problem amongst football, I think, for the last forever really, is that it's easy to forget that these footballers are also people. They have, they wake up and take their kids to school and whatever, just like everyone does. So they are humans as well as football players. And just a little 10-minute video on Instagram of them driving around Liverpool, having a bit of banter, with Jordan Henderson or amongst each other or whoever, it's just nice to see, and it just shows the human behind the athlete. And again, that creates that stronger appeal for brands, because you then feel like you're being marketed to you from a human who you know, because then it kind of builds trust. Like if your best friend told you about a product, you're more likely to trust it than if the company told you about the product. So if you can actually build that relationship with fans through your social media, then they're much more likely to actually be influenced by you. And like I say, that's what builds leverage with those commercial opportunities, which is obviously what you want, because that sets you up for long-term success financially after your career, and that's what every athlete wants ultimately.
And they nail on the head being authentic. You were talking about it 5 minutes ago. If you're not being authentic through your posts and through your online behavior, people know it, and they don't want to engage with you anymore, and they don't aspire to be like you or around you or watch your content. But these guys are so natural and real. They've got that perfect balance, and I'm sure they've been advised, by the way, on how
Yeah,
to do this the best
yeah,
way. They've got professionals telling them how to produce their content, and they've got professionals editing it, I'm sure. And they've managed to capture their personality authentically in a really high quality way. And you want to get more of it. You, as you say, you feel like you know them better, and you want to be around them more.
yeah. I definitely agree, and it just again just showing who you are and being authentic, I think, is the most important thing that I tell athletes who I've spoke to briefly about how to do this. And like you said earlier, when you just hire someone to tweet on your behalf, it's just not the same. You can just tell. Even if you just do an interview after a game and you're media trained and you just give the same generic answers of, yeah, we boys worked hard in training, yeah, no one cares. It's boring. And McGregor did the exact opposite in the UFC, and that's what got interested in him. And I know MMA is obviously much different to football in the kind of context in which it is, but nevertheless, I think the point still valid is that he was entertaining in some capacity. If you're not telling your audience in a media interview something entertaining or something interesting, they don't care. If it's just generic cliches that footballers always use, no one cares about the interview. So again, it doesn't get put in front of people. People don't share it. And there's no magic formula to that, but it's just be authentic and engage with people once you have their attention. That's
Right.
as simple as it is, I think, really.
And probably one of the most interesting and highlights of my career was working with Usain Bolt when I worked in athletics for a while. And Usain Bolt's just the epitome of natural, like upbeat. He was a bit crazy. Like he would dance on the start line before races, and he would be wacky in interviews. And he would, he had his pose when he won every race. And his personality just shone. It transcended sport, not just athletics, probably transcended culture. Everyone knows who Usain Bolt is because he let his like beautiful personality out constantly.
And that's exactly it. And it gets people invested in him. And then when he races, it feels like it's a part of history. It's like the whole world stops. Usain Bolt is about to sprint 100 meters, and then he does it, smashes it, demolishes everyone, and does his little pose. Which, when he did a campaign with Virgin, he obviously did the pose in the ad, and it makes him identifiable to people who watch the ad. If they're not that familiar with athletics, they're like, okay, that's the sprinter who does that little pose. It just adds a bit of value to his brand at the end of the day. Even like the Jordan pose where he's like dunking a basketball, it's like that has become literally its own brand. CR7 as a brand, and obviously he has his famous celebration where he like tenses all his muscles. It wouldn't surprise me if he becomes merch after he retires with that kind of like iconic sort of like silhouette on it or something like that, kind of like Jordan as well. So it just goes to show that if you just pay a little bit of attention and just show who you are and be authentic, it just goes such a long way to actually building a commercial brand off of your name and your image and your likeness, which is, again, the key to longevity. It will help you transition into retirement also, which is what a lot of athletes can struggle with sometimes. So that really is just the kind of secret recipe. It's not a secret anymore, but there you go.
Absolutely.
We have a little bit of time left, really about 10 minutes or so. So we'll talk very quickly about the Inter Miami partnership with UCFB, if I may. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. As you know, I'm here in Wembley today, Wembley Stadium. Well, fake Wembley background, clearly, but I'm fortunate enough to work at Wembley. Our university's got campuses at Wembley and at the Etihad in Manchester. I know George, of course, graduated from there, and we're going around the world and doing the same thing overseas. We've got some agreements in New York, Toronto, Atlanta and Melbourne to work in stadiums there already and build campuses there in the next couple of years. But the latest one that we're adding to the mix is into Miami. So opening a campus in Miami starting in 2021, working with that brand new football club. The club has only just had its first season in Major League Soccer. And they're such an interesting brand to work with. They are so talented. Their brand team, their design team, are so good at what they do. And I'm sure you've seen their club crest and their colorways that they use, the pink and the black, and they've just decided they've stood out so well in sport. They don't look like your typical football club. They've really embodied the Latin flavor of Miami, and they consulted a lot with the city and fan groups and so on before launching their brand. And it's really exciting to work with an organization like that. Of course, everyone probably knows that that's David Beckham's team. He, with I think 3 other owners in that ownership group, launched the club. His first endeavor into football ownership. So it's amazing to work with his vision, with his club, to build a campus over in the Miami area. And I hope, I'm sure we're going to be able to provide our students both in the UK and in future in the USA with a lot of learnings from those guys. Absolutely want to bring in the guest speakers and even the sporting side of the club to teach the next generation and to tell them how they've built this already kind of iconic team out of nothing that's only just launched in Miami. So yeah, I couldn't be more happy to work with those people. Unbelievable, talented group of people in sport over there, especially sports marketing.
Yeah. Again, it's into Miami. They kind of have the inherent advantage of David Beckham's personal brand. Like, there it is again. That's the importance of it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how obviously all the global study hubs play out, and I think it's going to be really beneficial for no matter where you're studying at UCFB, at which campus, to have all these perspectives and this massive network of sports across the globe. I mean, obviously, American sports is a lot different than to how it is over here, and I'm sure it's the same can be said for Australia. So, yeah, I really can't wait to see how all that plays out.
One of our aims with building these global hubs around the world, so signing a partnership with New York Red Bulls to have a hub in Red Bull Arena, signing a partnership with Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment so that we have a hub in Toronto at BMO Field. One of the aims of signing these partnerships and bringing the content and bringing student opportunities in is to build our university's brand so that when you graduate, the likes of you and students in future, people around the world know where you come from. They know you come from the leading sports university. They know that you've got a great network. You've probably had great guest speakers. You've probably had great assignments you've been working on, and you've been getting really stuck into the sports industry. So if you in future want to go and work in New York, they know about your background. They know your university. It's all a brand building exercise, obviously with amazing benefits of student opportunities and guest speakers and so on. But we want the sports industry to know who our brand is and who our graduates are, so that you can be leading big sport organizations in 5 or 10 years. And as a sports marketer by trade, I love building an organization's brand just as much as I used to love building an athlete's brand. It's all awareness, brand, fans, customers, everything in life. It has those principles behind it.
Yeah, I really can't wait to obviously see how all that plays out, and I'm sure it'll be incredibly successful. And for obviously anyone watching who is considering where to go to study at university, I obviously can't recommend UCFB enough. What they've done for me, what they've done for many other students. If you're looking to work in sports in any capacity, there's bound to be a degree for you. So feel free to go and check UCFB out. I'll leave a link to their website in the description, and to all their socials. Yeah, I think that kind of wraps us up for today. So, James, thank you very much for your time again. I appreciate you're obviously very busy, so I appreciate you finding the time to sit down and have a chat with me.
Thank you so much. Coming live from Wembley, and I just want to say good luck on your agency that you're building. So I think it's a much needed niche for many athletes, especially those on the up and coming, those who aren't rich yet, those who aren't the best in the world. you got to sort your personal branding, your social media, your image out, and get professionals to help you with it, because it can be a difference maker, and it can take a weight off your shoulders. It can allow you to focus on what you need to be focusing on in the ring or on the track or on the pitch. So, you know, good luck with that, all that, George, and you're absolutely going to help a lot of athletes achieve their dreams, I'm sure.
Thank you very much. Thanks again for your time, and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.